First, though, thousands of protesters remain outside Hong Kong's police headquarters, where they've been demanding the release of anti-government demonstrators and the resignation of the city's leader, Carrie Lam.
32 people have been arrested since protests against an extradition bill began in early June. 8 cases have since been dropped, but the fate of 24 people remains in the balance. While today's protest has been largely peaceful, police officers have now locked all entrances to the building. That's after protesters attempted to storm in. Assistant Commissioner of Police and Regional Commander Patrick Kwok Pak Chung was sent to talk to the crowd but failed to make any headway. Police were forced to suspend services at their Wan Chai headquarters. Services were severely delayed as officers in Wan Chai were unable to immediately respond to emergency calls.
A new wave of demonstrations hit Hong Kong today as protesters brought traffic to a standstill around Admiralty and Wan Chai. What started off as a peaceful sit-in outside the Legislative Council soon turned into a mass siege on the Hong Kong police headquarters. Hundreds of people wearing black started gathering bright and early this morning after the government continued to ignore their demands. And at around 11 a.m., the crowd surged and again began blocking major highways in Admiralty. Buses, cars and lorries were blocked as the activists filled the lanes on Harcourt Road. Some protesters set up makeshift barricades to mark their occupied section of the road. However, minutes later, pro-democracy activist Joshua Wong made a call to protesters in Admiralty to move their demonstration to the police headquarters in Wan Chai. Within an hour, thousands had surrounded the building and nearby roads.
Occupy outside the police headquarters and urge police apologize to people with how they use rubber bullets, shoot towards people, and define protests as riot. And we have more than thousands activists gathered outside police headquarters.
The police force appealed to protesters to stop blocking the area and to leave peacefully, but the defiant crowds refused to back down. Demonstrators continued their calls for the government to scrap the controversial extradition bill. They also renewed their calls for Chief Executive Carrie Lam to resign.
She's not prepared, obviously, to give the impression that she's climbing further down, bowing to people's pressure, because this Hong Kong government, at the behest of Beijing, is used to show authority of an executive-led administration. But the replies these days, her responses, have come in too little, too late, and too fake, I'm afraid, and the young simply find them rather unacceptable, and that's why that explains the huge crowd here, Stu, this morning. We just hope everything will be kept reasonably peaceful today.
Tension soared throughout the afternoon, with police raising a warning flag when protesters tried to rush into the building. Police officers made several attempts to negotiate with the activists, but failed. By lunchtime, the rally spread to nearby government buildings, and protesters started blocking other nearby roads. Demonstrators didn't stop government staff from doing their work. However, the large-scale gathering prompted some government departments to let staff go home early. This is the first time that protesters laid siege on the police headquarters and numerous other government buildings as they try to ramp up pressure on the government.
For more analysis on the situation, Andrew Xuan, Research Director at the Lion Rock Institute, joins us from Hong Kong. Andrew, the deadline to scrap the controversial extradition bill has come and gone. As we've seen from the live pictures, there are just an incredible amount of people of Hong Kong gathering outside the police headquarters and other government buildings. What do you expect is going to be happening as things sort of play out this evening?
Well, I think there are many things going on in parallel right now. Apart from the things that you see on camera, there are also things happening behind the scenes. If you look at the interbank lending rate of Hong Kong, it has been going up considerably in the last 2 weeks. And there are individual banks in Hong Kong with mainland ownership that has seen other banks only lend to them if they were to pay over the market rate as well. So apart from protesters surrounding government buildings, and yes, your journalist was very correct that a lot of the functions actually carried on. One of my friends tried to pay tax today at the Inland Revenue Services, one of the buildings surrounded, and he had to go through protesters, but he said he was very successful in paying taxes. So it is still peaceful, but as you have said, the 4 demands from the protesters have not been met, which is the complete withdrawal of the amendment bill, the reclassification of what happened last Wednesday from a riot to other classifications, so that those who arrested will not be charged under circumstances of being rioters, an investigation as to why police used such force on last Wednesday, and finally, of course, the resignation of Carrie Lam. But none of them have been met, so the protesters will continue in a wildcat manner. I mean, even the organizers of the 2 previous Sundays, million-plus marches, have said that this Sunday there will not be any more large-scale marches. So it's very much non-leader-driven protests right now, and protesters are organizing through many social media apps such as Telegram.
Andrew, let's talk about what's at the heart of this protest, the bill. It has been scrapped in all but name, hasn't it? But why is there still this demand for it to be, as they say, fully scrapped?
Well, I think it's actually summed up best by an American senator when asked by the press why the Americans insist in the China-U.S. trade dispute that only until China implements the reform demanded by the Americans and not just sign an agreement that the tariffs will be lifted. And the American senator simply said that the Americans have been suffering from promise fatigue from Beijing. And I think there's one place on earth that suffers even more than the Americans about promise fatigue from Beijing, that is Hong Kong people. So from that perspective, a promise of suspending the bill is not enough. In fact, one of the establishment legislators went on TV this morning saying that if government was to sell the bill better or sell the amendment better, it can be reintroduced again in 1 or 2 months. And that really triggered a lot of people because that went viral very quickly in Hong Kong. And also, a lot of the footages from last Wednesday began to circulate in Hong Kong, whereby there was one particular incident near the government headquarters in front of an office building. Protesters has been completely surrounded by 2 groups of policemen, and police still fired tear gas within the crowd. And luckily, the office building glass door suddenly opened and allowed protesters to escape, or else they could have been trampled. So that also inflamed passions over the last few days in Hong Kong. So with the deadline passing and going, I'm not surprised at all that the police headquarters was surrounded today, because even establishment legislators asking for an inquiry, an official inquiry as to why the situation ended up as it was last Wednesday, was ignored. So basically, apart from an apology from Carrie Lam, our chief executive, a demand, by the way, that actually first came from the establishment legislators, not from the protesters themselves. Apart from that, there has been no actions taken. So it is not a surprise that these kind of protests are still continuing.
All right, Andrew, thank you very much for that perspective on this developing situation out of Hong Kong. Andrew Xuan there from the Lion Rock Institute.